My wife forgot about my birthday, and when reminded her, she laughed, together with her lover. I turned 36 last Thursday, and let me tell you, that day started like a cruel joke. You'd think after 8 years of marriage, your spouse would at least remember your birthday. Amanda, my wife, always had this icy detachment, like love to her was more of an obligation than a choice. But even knowing that, I thought maybe she'd make an exception this once. I wasn't expecting a surprise party or some grand gesture. Just a text. A cup of coffee waiting for me in the kitchen. Maybe a lousy card. Instead, I woke up in a house so silent it felt abandoned. I remember lying in bed for a while, eyes open, listening, nothing. No shuffling feet in the hallway, no bathroom sounds, no hum of the kettle. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers already rehearsing a thank you text. But there were no messages. Not from Amanda, not from anyone. No notifications. Just the default background and that little calendar reminder that said Tom's birthday. The bed next to me was cold. Amanda had already gotten up and left without waking me, which wasn't unusual. She worked in publishing and had this whole morning grind routine that I'd learned to stay out of. But it stung more that morning. I got up, made my way to the kitchen, and found it empty. No breakfast, no note, nothing out of the ordinary. No decorations, no coffee, just the same slightly chipped mug in the sink from the night before. That was the moment it hit me like a slow-rolling wave. Not even forgotten, just ignored. Not overlooked in the chaos of life. Amanda had actively chosen to make it just another Thursday. There was something about that realization that hit harder than I expected. Like my presence didn't even register as something worth acknowledging. I wandered around the kitchen like a ghost, half expecting to find some clue I missed. Maybe a cupcake hidden behind the cereal box. Maybe a little note near the coffee machine. But it was all just wishful thinking. I opened the fridge, saw the same half-eaten lasagna from 2 nights ago, and suddenly felt this heavy mix of disappointment and humiliation. I must have stood there for a solid minute, just staring at that stupid Tupperware container. The anger didn't come immediately. It simmered. I went back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my phone again. I scrolled through old messages. Last year's birthday text from Amanda. Happy birthday. Dinner later. That felt cold at the time, but at least it was something. The year before. Made you pancakes, smiley face. There'd even been a candle stuck in one. I had a photo of it somewhere. This year, nothing. By 10:30 a.m., I texted her. Did you forget what day it is? That's all I said. She didn't reply. I worked from home that day, which made it worse. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I didn't feel like doing anything productive, so I just sat at my desk, scrolling through social media like a pathetic teenager, hoping someone would remember. A few friends posted birthday wishes after they saw the date pop up, but it felt forced, like automated reminders, not real affection. Around noon, Amanda came home. I heard the keys in the door and the sound of her heels. She didn't call out to me or even glance in my direction when she walked into the living room. Just dumped her bag on the floor and went straight to the kitchen. She was talking on the phone, laughing. I remember thinking, maybe she's pretending. Maybe she's planning a surprise. But then she said, yeah, just got home. Ugh, today's been a drag. Nothing special. Nothing special. I stood up, walked to the kitchen doorway, and she looked up mid-sentence. Her expression didn't change. Hey, she said, holding the phone away from her face for half a second. I'll be off in a bit. I stared at her. You didn't remember, did you? She blinked, confused for a second, then tilted her head. Remember what? I didn't answer. I just waited. She furrowed her brow like I was inconveniencing her. Then she laughed, actually laughed, and said, oh crap. Is it your birthday? That was it. No apology. No hug. No, I'm sorry, I forgot. Just a dismissive laugh like she forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. I didn't even respond. I just went upstairs, shut the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed again, staring at nothing. Later that evening, she asked if I wanted to order takeout. That was her olive branch. Not because she felt guilty, because she was too tired to cook and figured she could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I said no. I told her I wasn't hungry. Truth was, I'd lost my appetite a long time ago. And that's how I spent my 36th birthday. Alone in a marriage that felt more like a roommate arrangement. No celebration. No card. No effort. Just me, a forgotten date, and the slow, painful realization that maybe I wasn't really seen anymore. Not by her. Not by anyone. On the 3rd day, something in me snapped. I'd spent the first 2 days trying to justify it, trying to believe there was still a chance Amanda had just made a mistake, that maybe she'd been overwhelmed, that maybe something unexpected had come up. But that morning I woke up with this sick weight in my chest that just wouldn't go away, and by afternoon, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was flat and distracted, The kind of tone you use when someone stops you in the grocery store to ask where the ketchup is. "Oh, hi. What's up?" she said, like I was a neighbor, not the man she'd been married to for nearly a decade. No mention of my birthday. No apology for the days of radio silence. I swallowed hard and asked if we were still going to dinner like we'd planned. There was a pause, long enough that I started thinking maybe she hadn't heard me, but then she sighed. The kind of sigh people make when they're inconvenienced by something that doesn't fit into their schedule. "I should have told you earlier," she said, dragging out the words like she hated having to say them at all. "I have other plans." I froze. I could feel my heartbeat behind my eyes. "Other plans?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, though I could feel it shaking. "On my birthday?" There was another pause, but this one didn't feel like hesitation. It felt like amusement. And then she laughed. Not a soft laugh, not a nervous laugh, but the kind of dismissive little chuckle you give when someone's being ridiculous. That was the moment something inside me went cold. That laugh cut deeper than anything else. It was like I was a child again, demanding attention I hadn't earned. That sound told me more than any words could have. She wasn't just done with my birthday. She was done with me. Then there was silence. A few seconds later, I heard it. A man's voice, not close but clear enough. He said something I couldn't make out, something casual, something comfortable, and then she spoke again, her voice lighter, warmer, directed at him, not me. "Leave me some dessert." She didn't even bother to mute the call. I didn't say anything after that. I just listened for another second or two, then hung up. My hand was clenched so tight around the phone that my knuckles had gone white. I stared at the screen, at her name still glowing there for a few seconds before it faded to black. I sat there in the silence of my living room, hearing the echo of that laugh and that stranger's voice on a loop in my head. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, still and numb, realizing that I wasn't just dealing with a forgotten birthday anymore. I was dealing with something that had already ended, and I had been the last one to notice. I sat there for a long time after hanging up the phone, just staring at the screen, not even really seeing it. The apartment was quiet, and for once that quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. I think part of me still wanted to believe that maybe I'd misheard, that maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But I knew better. Her laugh, that man's voice in the background, the way she said, "Leave me some dessert," like I didn't exist. There was no misunderstanding any of that. Something cracked in me then. Not the kind of crack that breaks you, but the kind that wakes you up. I wasn't going to spend the rest of the day sitting alone in a house that felt less like a home and more like a shell. If Amanda wanted to spend this day with someone else, fine. I wasn't going to chase her or beg her to remember who I used to be in her life. I still had people who gave a damn about me. It was time to stop waiting for love from someone who couldn't even give me a phone call. I grabbed my keys and walked out without thinking. I didn't text anyone. I didn't check the time. I just got in the car and started driving. And without even making a conscious decision, I ended up heading to Derek's place. Derek had been my best friend since college. The kind of guy who never had to be told when something was wrong. He just knew. He and Julia, his wife, were one of those couples that still believed in people, in connection. They never treated me like an outsider, even when I'd pulled back over the years, trying to manage the mess that was my marriage. They always called me honorary brother, and they meant it. By the time I pulled up outside their house, my hands were shaking, and I was half expecting to have to make up an excuse for showing up unannounced. But as soon as I rang the doorbell, Derek opened the door like he'd been waiting. I didn't even say anything. He just pulled me into a hug, one of those real, grounding ones, and said, "Took you long enough, man." I stepped inside and immediately felt the shift. The house smelled like vanilla and something sweet baking in the oven. It was warm. It was alive. Julia came from the kitchen, wiped her hands on a towel, and gave me the kind of hug you only get from someone who knows what you need before you say a word. Neither of them asked what happened. They didn't need to. I think my face said everything. And then I saw it. Sitting in the middle of the dining table was a chocolate cake with my name on it, and in frosting it read, "Happy birthday, Tom." My name, my birthday, remembered, celebrated, honored. I stared at it for a second too long, because I felt something welling up in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not sadness, not anger, not even relief. Just appreciation. Real, deep appreciation. The kind you don't even know you've been starving for until it's handed to you without condition. Derek clapped me on the back and said, "It's store-bought," but Julia insisted on the fancy kind. Said you deserve the good stuff. Julia rolled her eyes and smiled. "He's the one who picked the cake. I just added the decoration. Bad handwriting and all." I laughed. I actually laughed. It felt rusty and strange, but it came out anyway. And that was the moment. That's when everything shifted. Not because someone remembered my birthday, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to earn my place in someone's heart. I already had one. Right there, at that table, with that cake, surrounded by the kind of people who didn't need a reminder to care. Dinner at Derek and Julia's felt like stepping into a different world, one where everything just made sense. It wasn't just that the food was incredible, though it really was. Julia had somehow managed to remember every single one of my favorites, from the rosemary roasted chicken to the mashed sweet potatoes with the crispy edges, and even that stupidly specific salad I always used to rave about in college, the one with the candied pecans and the balsamic glaze. But more than the food, it was the atmosphere, the way everything around me hummed with a kind of quiet joy I hadn't realized I'd been missing. There wasn't any small talk for the sake of filling silence, no walking on eggshells, no filtered conversations designed to keep the peace like at home with Amanda. Just real, honest connection. Julia was in the kitchen putting the final touches on dinner when their youngest, Emma, came racing in from the living room with this giant handmade card that looked like a rainbow had exploded across it. She jumped right into my lap, shoved the card into my chest, and grinned like she'd just won an award. "Happy birthday, Uncle Tom," she said, beaming. Her brother, Max, followed right after, a little shy but clearly excited, handing me his own card, a crayon drawing of me with what I assume was supposed to be a cape. "You're like a superhero," he mumbled, and then darted back into the other room. I sat there holding those two messy, beautiful pieces of paper in my hands and felt something swell in my chest that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something purer, like being seen, really seen, without having to fight for it. When we all sat down at the table, Julia launched into a story about a client who mistook her for a completely different agent and insisted she'd sold him a house in 2009. The way she told it had everyone laughing, even Max, who barely understood what was going on but cracked up just because the energy was so infectious. Derek, never one to miss a chance to poke fun at himself, started making jokes about getting older, how his back now made sounds like a microwave when he stood up too fast, how he found a gray hair in his beard and thought it was a piece of thread. "Middle age is just a scavenger hunt for new aches," he said, grinning as he poured me another glass of wine. As I listened to them banter, watched their kids giggle over inside jokes and occasional squabbles, I realized something I hadn't been able to put into words until that moment. This was the life that made sense. Not the performative kind Amanda and I had tried to convince ourselves we were living. The posed smiles at dinner parties, the cold exchanges behind closed doors, the birthdays forgotten because there was always something more important. No, this was something else entirely. There was no falsity in this room, no hidden expectations, no manipulation disguised as affection, and most importantly, no feeling that I was somehow a burden to be tolerated. I didn't have to earn my place at that table. I was just wanted there. And that feeling, that simple, human feeling, was the warmest thing I'd experienced in years. We were halfway through dinner when Derek put his fork down and looked at me with that no-nonsense kind of seriousness he only pulled out when it really mattered. "What happened with Amanda?" he asked, not in a way that demanded gossip or pity, just straight concern, the kind that comes from someone who actually gives a damn. I hadn't planned on telling them. I thought I'd just let the evening be what it was, a rare moment of peace. But the question hung there, and it didn't feel right to dodge it. So I told them. I kept it simple, just laid it out. I told them she forgot my birthday, that there wasn't a card, a text, a single sign she'd even remembered the day. I told them how I called her after 2 days of silence, and she answered like I was a random telemarketer interrupting her lunch. I told them how, when I asked if we were still doing dinner, she sighed like I'd asked her to move furniture, and then casually said she had other plans. I repeated her exact words. "I should have told you earlier," and watched both Derek and Julia's expressions darken. But I wasn't finished. I told them about the laugh, that dry, dismissive little snort that made me feel like a child tugging on his mother's sleeve for attention. And then I told them about the voice. How after that laugh, I heard a man in the background. I couldn't hear exactly what he said, but I didn't have to. And then came her line, like it was nothing at all. "Leave me some dessert." Julia threw her hands up in the air like something inside her had just snapped. This is cheating on the air," she said, her voice somewhere between outrage and disbelief. Derek didn't say anything at first, but I could see it in his jaw, clenched tighter than I'd seen in a long time. I just nodded. I didn't try to downplay it. I didn't explain it away. For once, I wasn't rushing to soften the truth or offer excuses on Amanda's behalf. There was no stuttering, no cracked voice. I wasn't shaking or tearing up. I was calm, strangely calm, because I had finally let myself see what had been in front of me for far too long. Amanda hadn't just forgotten a birthday. She hadn't just been distant or tired or going through something. She had chosen not to be in this marriage anymore. She had chosen someone else's company on the day I needed her most. And the worst part was, she hadn't even bothered to lie well. She hadn't even tried to cover it up. That laugh, That was the sound of someone who stopped caring a long time ago and finally felt free enough to show it. For the first time since everything started, I felt no urge to defend her. No guilt. No confusion. Just this slow-burning acceptance that things had already fallen apart, and I was the one still trying to pretend it hadn't. There was no more pretending now. The truth wasn't whispered anymore. It was out in the open, and I had said it aloud. And for the first time in years, it didn't crush me. It freed me. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes drifting in through the cracked door of the guest room, the kind of smell that wraps around you like a warm blanket before you've even opened your eyes. For a second, I forgot where I was, and then I remembered. I wasn't at home. I wasn't lying in that cold, hollow apartment next to a woman who had spent my birthday with someone else. I was here, in Derek and Julia's house, in a room that still had traces of crayon drawings on the walls from when their kids were younger, under a quilt that Julia's mom had sewn years ago. And somehow, even though I hadn't slept in this room before, it felt more like home than my own bedroom had in years. I stretched, let myself breathe in that moment a little longer before grabbing my phone off the nightstand. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Over a dozen missed calls from Amanda, 3 voicemails, several texts, and at the top of them all was a message that immediately told me everything I needed to know about her state of mind. What kind of post is this? You're making a fool of me. That was the first message I opened, and I just stared at it. Not because I didn't expect it, but because it confirmed exactly what I'd been feeling the night before. No, I'm sorry. No, I messed up. Just panic, the kind that doesn't come from guilt or regret, but from damage control. She'd seen my post. The photo Julia had taken at dinner, me sitting at their table with a slice of cake in front of me, Derek raising his glass and a toast, Emma's little drawing stuck next to my plate. I'd written a simple caption. Thank you to those who are truly with me. This was the best birthday I've had in a long time. That was all I said. No names, no accusations. Just the truth. And yet Amanda's response wasn't to ask why I'd left, or how I was feeling, or even if she could talk. It was about her. Her image. Her reputation. Her control slipping. I scrolled through the other messages. One just said, call me. Another, can you take that down? And then another one, a little more desperate. We need to talk before people start assuming things. People start assuming things. It was so absurd I actually laughed. Not bitterly. Not cruelly. Just one of those short, exhausted laughs when the mask finally drops and everything becomes so transparent, it's almost pathetic. She wasn't sorry. She was embarrassed. That was it. I didn't respond. I put the phone down, got out of bed, and stepped into the hallway where I could already hear Julia humming in the kitchen and the kids chattering about cartoons. Derek greeted me with a mug of coffee, handed it over like it was sacred, and asked, "Sleep okay?" I nodded. I didn't need to say anything else. Because in that moment, it was clear, the difference between being seen and being used, between being valued and being tolerated. Amanda could have picked any of those messages to say she was sorry. She didn't. And I finally understood that I didn't owe her anything anymore. Not an answer. Not an explanation. Not a single word. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Derek, halfway through a second cup of coffee, when the front door flew open without warning. Amanda didn't knock. She didn't text. She just stormed in like she still had the right. Julia was in the living room with the kids, and everything went dead quiet when Amanda's heels hit the hardwood floor like gunshots. She looked like she hadn't slept, hair tied back too tightly, eyes wide with something between rage and panic. "Are you serious with this?" she shouted, walking straight toward me as if we were alone in the world. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone." Derek stepped between us immediately, calm but firm. "You don't get to just barge into my house." She ignored him completely, eyes locked on me like I was the only one she came to fight. I didn't get up. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her and said, "What about you?" My voice was steady, quieter than hers, but somehow louder. "What about the way you humiliated me on my birthday?" She opened her mouth like she had something locked and loaded, but nothing came out. Just silence. Her arms dropped to her sides, but her jaw stayed tight, still trying to win whatever game she thought this was. I stood up slowly and faced her without a trace of fear. "You forgot my birthday. You didn't say a word for 2 days. Then you laughed in my face while sitting next to another man. Don't talk to me about humiliation." Her expression shifted, just slightly, like she'd expected tears or begging, not confrontation. She looked around like she was just now realizing she had an audience, like maybe it hadn't occurred to her that this wasn't her stage to control anymore. Then the mask slipped off completely. "You want to play this out in public?" she snapped. "Fine. I'll go to the lawyers. You want a divorce? You'll lose more than just me. You'll lose money. You'll lose the apartment. Your little victim post made me look bad. Don't think I won't fight back." That's when I laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was just pure disbelief. A soft, clean laugh that felt like exhaling the last breath I'd been holding for years. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? I asked. She blinked like that question didn't compute, like it wasn't part of the script. But I wasn't performing for her anymore. Whatever power she thought she had over me had burned out the second she picked another man over a phone call. The second she looked at me like I was an afterthought. I didn't know her fear. I didn't know her anything. Derek moved closer, gently but firmly placing a hand on her shoulder. You need to leave, he said, not asking. Amanda looked at me one last time, and for the first time since the whole thing began, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not control. Just recognition. That she'd lost. That she wasn't the one holding the leash anymore. She turned and walked out without saying another word. No apology. No attempt at a scene. Just the sound of the door closing behind her and the quiet that followed. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt light. Not victorious. Just free. It didn't end with her walking out Derek's door. I knew it wouldn't. Amanda was never the type to let go quietly. The next day, the real storm began. I started getting texts from coworkers, not the usual casual check-ins, but awkward, hesitant messages asking if I was okay. One even asked if I was really moving to another state. That's when I found out she'd called my office. She actually picked up the phone and called my boss, telling him I'd left her without warning, that I was emotionally unstable, that I was having some sort of midlife breakdown and might not be fit to work. That same afternoon, I heard from two mutual friends who were clearly confused and trying to stay neutral, but their questions told me all I needed to know. Amanda had started spinning a narrative, one where she was the blindsided wife left to suffer while her cruel husband ran off into the sunset. Then came the post. A carefully filtered photo of her looking heartbreakingly sad with a caption that read, "My husband left me at the worst possible time. Please respect my privacy while I try to heal from this unexpected pain." No names. No direct accusations. But just enough implication to turn some heads. It was clever. Calculated. But I had been through enough with her to know this was coming. I was ready. That same day, I met with a lawyer, someone Derek had referred me to, a no-nonsense woman who didn't flinch when I laid out what had happened. We froze our joint accounts, flagged all credit activity, and documented everything. Every message, every call, every online stunt. She even helped me draft a formal warning that I delivered to my employer, explaining the situation professionally, but clearly. I let them know Amanda was attempting to discredit me, and that she might escalate. Then came the voicemail. She must have left it sometime after her little social media stunt, probably when she realized her carefully curated narrative wasn't spreading as quickly as she'd hoped. Her voice was sharp and breathless, and she didn't even try to hide her rage. "If you don't stop this," she said, "I swear I will destroy you. You think anyone's going to believe your side? I've already talked to people. I can make this hell for you." I listened to it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to make sure I caught the exact wording. Then I took a screenshot. Her name, the timestamp, the transcription. I posted it without a single word of commentary. Just the image. The reaction was fast and brutal. People who had been sitting on the fence, people I hadn't heard from in months, suddenly started commenting, messaging, calling. Friends I thought I'd lost. Colleagues who had once seemed distant. Even people I barely knew sent messages of support, saying they'd seen through her act, that they were sorry for believing her version even for a moment. The tide shifted fast. Because when someone shows you exactly who they are in their own voice, there's no room left for spin. Amanda didn't say anything after that. Not to me. Not publicly. The calls stopped. The posts disappeared. But I didn't need silence from her to know it was over. She'd tried to weaponize her image, to manipulate the people around us like pieces on a board. But this time, I wasn't playing her game. This time, I had the truth and the receipts. Once the posts started spreading and the tide turned against her, Amanda did what she always did when control slipped out of her hands. She changed tactics. The sharp tone and threats disappeared overnight, replaced by tearful messages that piled into my inbox like desperate confessions. She started calling at odd hours, leaving voicemails filled with shaky breathing and choked-up apologies, trying to sound like someone who had just realized how much she had lost. One message said she couldn't sleep, another said she hadn't eaten. She wrote that she'd made mistakes, that she was hurting too, that she just wanted a chance to explain. I didn't respond at first, not because I was playing some game, but because there was nothing left to say. Nothing she could say that would make me forget the years of being treated like an obligation in my own home, of being slowly starved of affection, of having to beg for the most basic acts of care. This wasn't about one birthday. That was just the final thread snapping. This was about the thousands of little ways she had made me invisible long before anyone else noticed. Eventually, I answered a single message. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted to end it. I typed it slowly, without hesitation, without bitterness, just clarity. This is not about the publication. This is about the years of your neglect. About indifference, manipulation, and lies. And it's over. That was it. No explanation. No second paragraph. No olive branch. Just the truth. After I sent it, I sat back and waited for the familiar guilt to rise up, the kind that used to make me wonder if I'd overreacted or if I was being too sensitive. But it never came. No regret. No anger. Just a quiet, unwavering sense of relief. Like I'd finally set something down I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. She sent a few more messages after that. One said she didn't recognize me anymore. Another tried to say I'd changed. But even her words felt hollow now, like someone reading from a script that no longer worked. The mask had collapsed. Whatever power she once had over me, whatever hold, it was gone. The threats didn't scare me. The tears didn't move me. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly where I stood. Free. A few weeks went by, quietly and without drama, and I didn't hear from Amanda again. By then, I had already moved out of the apartment and signed a lease on a small house out near the lake. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a wide porch, and enough space between me and the rest of the world to finally breathe. The first morning there, I sat outside with a cup of coffee and listened to the sound of nothing. No tension in the walls. No phone vibrating with accusations. Just the wind, the birds, and the creak of the old wooden steps beneath my feet. It felt like I was waking up for the first time in years. I started going fishing again, something I used to love but had stopped doing because Amanda thought it was a waste of time. I bought a second-hand tackle box and a rusty old rowboat that took half a Saturday to patch up. I'd forgotten how peaceful it could be, sitting alone on the water, watching the surface ripple in the late afternoon light. It didn't matter if I caught anything. Being out there was enough. I picked up another old hobby too, working on cars. I found a beat-up '91 Jeep Cherokee on Craigslist and spent weekends in the garage, slowly bringing it back to life. Grease under my nails, classic rock on the radio, the satisfaction of fixing something with my own hands. It grounded me in a way nothing else could. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I started saying yes to more invitations from friends. Derek and Julia stayed close, of course, but I also reconnected with a few people I'd unintentionally pushed away over the years. We had beers. We grilled steaks. We told the same stories more than once and laughed anyway. I also started volunteering at a local youth club on the weekends, helping out with mentorship for teenagers who needed someone to show up. Just show up. That's all it took. I didn't preach or pretend to have it all figured out. I just listened, shared what I could, and stayed consistent. It was simple, but it mattered, to them and to me. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still days where I felt the weight of everything I'd been through. But the difference now was that the life I was living was finally mine. Not shaped around someone else's expectations, not bent to keep peace in a house built on silence. I didn't have to earn kindness or chase approval. I didn't feel like I was walking on glass just to avoid another cold shoulder. One evening, I sat on the dock behind the house, watching the sun melt into the lake. The water was still, the sky burning orange and purple, and I realized that this was it. This was the gift I'd been missing. It wasn't the cake I didn't get, or the dinner Amanda skipped. It was this, freedom. Freedom from the weight, from the doubt, from the constant sense that I was never quite enough. I had let go of what was dragging me down, and in doing that, I finally came up for air. Thanks for reading this far. I know this one was a little heavier than usual, but I'm curious, what would you have done? Have you ever had a moment where everything cracked open and you realized it was time to walk away? Let me know what you think. I really want to hear your side of it.